Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, November 20th, 2020. How taxes affect your life. Governments like ours may print money, but they don't create wealth. The wealth of a people is created by the production of goods and services. Governments rely primarily on the taxes its citizens pay to fund their operations. Now, throughout history, governments have survived as long as the governed believed that the governments were doing their jobs at an acceptable cost. When the governed decided that the cost of government was too high, or that the government was not providing the basic services they demanded, then that government failed. Today, governments seem to have forgotten that every dollar a family pays in taxes is a dollar that can't be used to pay other expenses or bills. Now, the following examples shed some light on the total income earned in the U.S. and the total taxes collected at all levels of government. According to a report on Statista.com, personal income was $17.83 trillion in 2018. Now, the Tax Policy Center looked at the breakdown of revenues collected by federal, state, and local governments as stated in the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis 2020 National Income and Product Accounts. They found that federal government current receipts were just under $3.5 trillion in 2018. State government current receipts just under $1.8 trillion in 2018, and local government current receipts just over $1.4 trillion. Now that means that federal, state, and local governments combined took $6.7 trillion out of the $17.83 trillion that people earned in 2018. That is a hefty 38% of the total personal income that governments extracted out of people's pockets in that year. While the 38% did not affect every taxpayer the same because it's generally based on varying things like income levels and property values, that is still a significant amount of money that the governments took out of the hands of the people who earned it. Now, obviously, not all of the money that governments took from the people was returned to them in the form of services. After all, governments have to pay salaries and benefits to their employees and cover overhead expenses. Still, a lot of that money was just wasted. Senator Rand Paul publishes the Waste Report, and among the items he pointed out in his 2019 edition were, our government spent $2 million to increase trust between Tunisian political parties and citizens. $2 billion was spent to convert an abandoned mental hospital, St. Elizabeth's Hospital, a historic landmark by the way, into a Department of Homeland Security headquarters. There was a $10 million green growth initiative in Peru, $100,000 for the Pakistani film industry, and $46,991 to study frog mating calls in Panama. Also, more than $5.3 million of taxpayer money funded false claims for Superstorm Sandy in New York City, and $48 billion went toward fraudulent Medicare payments. And that was just the federal government. How many times have we seen examples of enormous waste due to ineptitude or greed by state and local governments as well? As Jade Wally pointed out in his excellent article highlighted last week about the advantages of implementing a fair tax in Texas, not only would there be substantial overhead savings by eliminating the property tax system, but it would also be much more apparent to all Texas taxpayers how much they were actually paying to local and state governments. In conclusion, governments have found that sending families just one tax bill is not really a good idea. When people get a clear picture of just how much of their money governments are taking from them, they tend to get upset about that and question if they're getting their money's worth. Consequently, almost no one really knows how much total tax they pay. For example, a company providing goods or services has to price its products in such a way as to cover all of its costs and generate a reasonable profit. Now, of course, those costs include the property tax, the gasoline tax, sales taxes, state and federal income taxes, and state and federal payroll taxes. In the end, Consumers have no clue how much these taxes are driving up the prices of the goods and services they buy. Now, a proposed Illinois constitutional amendment to allow the state to convert from a flat state tax to a progressive income tax was defeated soundly by Illinois voters. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker said, quoting, "One big reason the tax amendment failed is that people don't trust government. They've seen too many examples of corruption and mismanagement. They've encountered too many government employees who just don't care." End of quote. Governor, the reason the proposed amendment failed is that people indeed don't trust government, and that's with good reason. 4 of Illinois' last 7 governors have spent time in prison. Now, isn't it time that governments at all levels recognize that they are in the service business? The purpose of government is supposed to be to provide services to the citizens for which the citizens pay. Why is government the only service we purchase where its true cost is hidden from us? Well, the answer is obvious. Politicians know that if the people knew the full cost of government, many would find that they're not getting their money's worth and would demand change. Politicians are primarily concerned with what's good for them and not necessarily what's good for us, and they believe that a less expensive government would not be good for them. When the fair tax is adopted at the federal level, people can decide if the benefits they receive are worth the taxes they're paying. If the fair tax is adopted by the states, then the costs of government become even more transparent. As Winston Churchill said, truth is incontrovertible. Panic may resent it, ignorance may deride it, malice may distort it, but there it is. It's time for governments to tell us the truth about how much their services are really costing us. Now, if you have friends who don't know about the fair tax, send them to FAIRtax.org. Have them watch the whiteboards under How It Works, and if they agree, ask them to please join us. Then, contact your member of Congress and the President and demand that Congress pass the fair tax, the only truly fair tax.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.